Hello. In this video, I want to show you how to continue the series of videos for Oracle, installing Oracle Linux, which is the unbreakable Linux. On top of that, I want to install Oracle Express Edition, which is the free Oracle database. And ultimately, on video 3, we're going to be installing Oracle Apex, which is Application Express based on PL SQL, to develop enterprise apps 20 times faster than the typical code. It's based on PL SQL. It has an accessors, the builders. It's an all meta programming, almost like kind of like a Node.js building some scaffolding applications like Ruby on Rails applications. This is based on PL SQL. Exports your application in 3 files: the database schema, the database content of the databases, and also the code, which is going to be compiled by PL SQL and give you a modern, responsive web application at ease. So, with all that said, on video 1, the previous video, we installed Oracle Linux, and we got it running in a virtual machine, running Oracle VirtualBox. We assign about 4 CPUs. We put 40 gigs of the hard drive space, and we allocate 4 gigs of RAM. Now, that seems to be like a lot of resources, but the idea was to actually allocate all the things that we described. If we look into that part of the network settings, we enable the localhost port 2222 to be able to SSH into the box. And that's exactly what we're going to do right now. This is the way it looks. I really like the theme in terms of kind of camouflage. They did a really good job. So let me go ahead and open my PuTTY SSH terminal, SSH client. I want to load, well, just to demonstrate a point, I want to go ahead and load settings on Oracle 8, which is localhost port 2222, and that's exactly what I'm connecting to. Connecting to this local machine, which is user is exactly the same user. Like if I will whether I click here, I should be able to go ahead and start connecting, right? Just the same thing. I just preferred the command line here. Now, as far as the resources, it's exactly the same thing. 45 gigs, just about 5 gigs with all the Windows updates, all the DNF updates as well as we did. And for the record, in the install, I guess I cannot drop the ball because I left it on. Let me sure I can as you root. So I got it right. So I guess I leave the default installation in American New York, which is Eastern time. That's not my time zone, so I want to go ahead and change it. I should do it install set up to Central time, and that's much better. That's just a little fix on the Boo the last time day controller. That was pretty cool. So with all that said, let's go ahead and get it installed. How I want to do the install? The Oracle database install is going to be based on Oracle Express Edition. There's a website on oracle.com for Express Edition, and you can actually download the database. There's a couple of things on the binaries. We want to be based the installation on the RPMs. Now keep this in mind. This freebie or this baby version of the database is going to give you 12 gigs of user data. It's going to use a max number of 2 gigs of RAM and only 2 CPU threads. I know I give this virtual machine 4 CPU threads, but it's just for the operating system. 2 CPU is going to be used at max for the database. And there's some restriction, because certainly this is a freebie version of Oracle. It gives the opportunity to learn, get your feet wet, and get familiar with the database. You can click on I suggest you to create a link here and log into the Oracle products. You can click on download the Oracle database, and you can see there's actually a couple versions: the Express Edition for Linux, the binary, and the Windows 64. Additionally, Oracle have a great job on pages and pages of documentation. This is what we're going to follow up: the Oracle installation RPM, basically the success of an Oracle installation is the prereqs. If you have to do your homework, get your prereqs, that will really help. And some cases when you don't have Oracle Linux, you might have another maybe CentOS or RHEL or some other Linux distribution. You might need to go ahead and go the extra mile and download some extra things like the Open Java Developer Kit to let it run internally, and potentially the Apache Tomcat. That's not going to be the case here. Ultimately, we want to build just Apex. So going back to here, we have this documentation. We have to run the print style. Prior to this video, I download some of the RPMs. This is going to be the requirements, the database print style, which is an RPM, and the actual database, which is another 2 gigs on the install. So with all that said, I create a file for the prereqs and help us to move forward. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to copy this Oracle RPM to the virtual machine. Oh, confusing commands. Oracle perhaps the port. Or let me just do this little quick trick here. PSEP, he did not specify the port, so let me go ahead and map just for this transfer. Yeah, he has to use PSEP the port 22. So let me go ahead and add it here. 127.0.0.1, 422 on the same. So PSEP is going to be happy, and the firewall is going to let him go through. Let's try again. All right, it worked. What this is doing is not going to take a whole lot of time. As you can see, the database print style is 18K. This is the RPM for the pre-checks. The 2.5 gigs on the database, that might take some time in the local host. While this is transferring, let's go back to the console real quick. Let's see the files. I can make a folder here. Let me move the Oracle database style, Oracle. While the other one is copied, let me go to that folder. And we can work as root here. Let's do super user. Change executive mode because it's an RPM. Nice. And if I do RPM-IVH verbose install this file, it's gonna complain. It's gonna tell us that it needs a lot of dependencies like compat, like glibc, cache, libio, libstdc. So in order to mitigate those things, have some of the requirements in some nice script for all these dependencies, the compat, the glibc, cache, libio. And I want to try to put these ones in the notes, a little cheat sheet. Let's go ahead and do DNF install to all these things, just using the package manager. So right now we can just paste this one directly into the shell. And it's going to do df install, that's y compat. And it's going to go ahead and check the repositories. It's going to start downloading everything that it needs to achieve these Oracle database print start requirements. As you can see, that package comes with another 10 packages. I pass the flag automatically yes. He's just going to go to town. He's going to start doing his work. Beauty of the package manager. In this case, they put it together. Some other distribution might use apt. And I have not attempted to install this in a Debian-based distribution or Arch. Neither on any of the BSD family. So this is just I guess bet all in, right? We're using Oracle for the virtualization, Oracle for the Linux unbreakable operating system. In this case, we're going to be Linux for the database, and on top of that, we're going to be using Oracle as well for the application express based on PL SQL. It's going to be all Oracle, Oracle all in. So that should be a nice distribution. This is going to be about 2.5 gigs. It should compress twice as more once it gets installed. It's going to be uncompressing to about 5 gigs. So 5 gigs for the operating system, 5 gigs from the install. That's going to give you 10 gig at least just running the operating system and the database itself. Once we actually go to Application Express, that's not actually that big, but with other gigs of data, we're going to be looking about another 5 gigs, 15 gigs plus the 10 that is going to give you. I would say just about 25 gigs to have you at least the minimum bourbon machine working. Maybe you can have another 5 for extra packages. I don't know, 30 gigs seems like a good fit. In this virtual machine, let's remember, we give them 40 gigs of hard drive space. And even though we give 4 CPUs, only two CPUs will be used for the Oracle Application Express. That's part of the licensing requirement. So we can see this is doing its job with the package manager, getting everything, all the dependencies in place. And as we go, as we speak, in the bottom, we can see the screen, the transfer, the local transfer of the 2.5 gigs between the machine and the virtual machine for the actual Oracle database XE and the works behind the scenes. So this continuous doing install is part of the prereqs. Again, the success of this installation on Oracle is going to be based on the prereqs. Make sure you have everything behind to get what you need, and the installation is going to be a walk in the park. It's one of the easiest installations of Oracle database. I remember the first installation Oracle. It was Oracle 6 on Red Hat 6 as well. Oracle 7, 6 or 7, I'm not sure. It's about 20 years ago, and it was a pain. It's almost like it was easier to relink in the kernel, the Linux kernel, than actually start Oracle. It was like its own operating system by itself, and they're coming a long way. They separate. I can see the separation of the what is called Oracle ORDS, Oracle REST database services, and the abstraction for those methods from the database. That I think that was a good move. I remember just about the time when it was Oracle Apex 10 embedded into the same distribution, everything just working out of the box. Early version of Apex. Before they decide to separate it, I submit some requests to actually, if they could actually make an integration with MySQL. I didn't know in that time Oracle would purchase MySQL to compete with the slower or the small market of the databases, the ones that don't need the whole 9 yards of Oracle. But it's becoming very competitive. So maybe some point it will change. But this is definitely a really nice way to get your feet wet, familiar with technology, learn about everything that is about Oracle. Really impressed with the Oracle distribution, the operating system. I think it's nice, it's clean, it seems to be pretty robust. And now that we're for all the folks who are considering something to go to replace our CentOS boxes, definitely I would say this is one of the solid solutions that it can really help us move the chain. Seems like we're going to the last line right here, and the transfer seems to be just about done. I can go back here, 100%. So we got the Oracle copied. We're doing the last part of the dependencies. Everything looks good. If I go back here, move Oracle to my Oracle, the folder, go back where we were, make a executable here, Oracle database. Yes, we're not installing just yet. Do one more time, IDH, the install. See what it looks like. Now seems like we have only 2 dependencies missing, the compat-libcap1 and the compat-libstd. So from our cheat sheet, there's a couple of little lines that we can actually get from the repository, because for some reason, if I do dnf install, let's say compat-libcap, somehow, I guess I haven't added to the repositories, it just can't find it. Maybe that will change in the future. Maybe they update the repositories to get it. So just as a quick workaround, let's go ahead and do the wget from these two guys, and it does make it's going to make something on the line here. This is this carriage return here on the file names. Here we go. Now we can actually go ahead and get our files. Nice. So we have couple more RPMs. Let's make it executable here. Let's chmod on 755, and ultimately let's install both. Let's do an ls compat rpm and xharsh. I pass it to rpm.ivh. Voila, that's all. So now if I do rpm-ivh Oracle database install, guess what? It's working. We have all the dependencies. This is cooking, and life is good. This is moving ahead with install. The prereqs actually is checking everything that needs in dependencies and returns no error. So that means we're pretty much good to go. I can, in this case, rpm-ivh Orcle XE and find the hole. Now, because we have all the dependencies, the big 2.5 gig database file or the RPM is going to start with the installation, and we should be able to see some results in terms of this install. It's going to take some time. This is one of the parts that actually takes the longest. For that reason, what I'm going to do is it takes about, I don't know, it's going to be 6:51 in the morning. I just 3-4 hours since I released the preview, the video one. But what I want to do is 4%. I want to pause the video. I'll go ahead and resume it so you don't have to wait this about 20-30 minutes, whatever it takes to do the install. I'll keep track of the time, and I'll go ahead and resume the video as soon as this RPM gets installed. We should be getting in really good shape in terms of our Oracle installation. We resume in a few, and see you then. Very good. Seems like the installation did not take as long as I thought. It was about 5-6 minutes, and it completed the RPM installation of the Oracle database XE successfully. Execute some post-installation scripts, and right now we have a message: the Oracle home installed successfully and ready to be configured. To configure Oracle Database XE, optionally you need to modify the parameters in etc sysconfig oracle xe.conf, and then execute the etc initd Oracle XE. So let's go ahead and take a peek to the file etc sysconfig Oracle XE -18c.conf. As you can see, there's not a whole lot on this file. Basically, tell us about the listener port, typically the port used by Oracle. This is a libn empty for automatic port assignment, which I think we want to do that. The Oracle Enterprise Manager Express URL port 5500. This is a web interface that actually in Oracle Enterprise Manager, the previous version typically uses Flash. Flash has been removed, so we're not going to touch this one. We're going to leave it as is. However, beware, this might be changed in the future because Oracle Enterprise Manager Express has been actually removed from the Flash Oracle Enterprise. What it looks like if you run it, you typically open a browser, it looks something like this. So eventually it's a nice, but this base is Flash based, which actually, since Adobe is not supporting Flash, the browser is going to complain. And typically it's a nice way you can see the partitions on your allocation of the database, the I/O, and the transfer, the ratio, some stats. Even though it's going to be installed, it would not be advisable to run. So anyway, that's what it's all about there. We're not going to touch it, we're going to leave it as is. The character set for the language, this is I choose to install the English version only. Database destinations, we want to leave it just to get a base or a data as the default. So nothing really to do here. I'm going to just leave it untouched. What I want to proceed to do now is go ahead and give it a shot to the etc initd as root. Oracle 18C configure. This is the one. It's actually going to take some time. That's the one I was meant to do. It's asking me right now specify a password for the database accounts. Oracle recommends the passwords to be at least 8 characters in length, contain at least 1 uppercase letter, 1 lowercase, and characters digits 1 to 9. So it's just to have a good practice in the passwords. The password will be used for system and PDB admin accounts. So I want to create a password, not password 123, of course, something else. That work. Well, I guess invalid characters. So let's try let's try hmm. Hmm. I guess let's keep it simple. Okay. So I entered a password, no with invalid characters. I was trying to put some characters, apparently did not like it. Maybe it was thinking it was escape, trying to hack into the password. So I just put something a lot simpler. It's configuring the Oracle listener. The listener is the main port that actually is going to be used to connect and to access. Is setting up the sys user password, system user password, PDB admin. And this part is the one uncompressing those 2.5 gigs is going to take some time for 7% complete, copying database files. That's the one is going to take some time here. If I look into the system, let's see how much has been installed so far. I can probably see that this Oracle Linux, I'm just logging in here. Let me do a little bit to the right. You can see the percentage right here in the back. This is a really nice background. I really enjoy this background. Not that actually the background is going to be the reason why I use an operating system, but nice and clean the ways the things are orchestrated here. So right now, we're looking about use 14 gigs. So what we did is we installed operating system, which it was just about 5 gigs. We download and copy 2.5 gigs of the install. We uncompress the database and install it. So that one we probably use 10, and it's actually doing even more. As you can see right now, we're in the process to uncompress the database, configure the Oracle, do some compilation, and we're already burning 14 gigs of the 40. So by the time it's all said and done, I expect this to be in just about 20 gigs of usage. With 10 more of usage, it's going to be 30. So yeah, I think at least the minimum install for this scenario with Oracle Linux, Oracle Express Edition, and Oracle Apex, it will take about 30 gigs some resources in CPU. So it's good to know. Right now, how is consumption? Memory, 1.6 gigs out of 3,000. So it's getting busy for sure. I don't think it's what's on top is Oracle. Oracle is taking the majority of the CPU resources right now working. Okay, let's go back here. This is going to take some time. I want to pause again the video because this is the configuration files for Oracle. That definitely takes some time. There's no point for keep you guys here just watching or editing later. 29% complete. Creating a starting Oracle instance. Wait a minute, it's probably jumping a lot faster than I thought. There might be some after settings. It jumped really fast from 7 to 29, but still we have a long way to go. Just 30% on the way in the configuration for 30%. Yeah, it's going to take some time from here to 100. So I'm gonna pause the video and I'm gonna resume once this is 100%. Be right back in a few. All right, guys, so we're back. The installation, so you can see, completed. Got a little bit on 30%. It took some time. It went through some steps, a lot of compilation, a lot of configuration of the Oracle Express Edition database. It finished completing creating the database, continued for 47 to creating the pluggable databases, executing the post-configuration actions, running custom scripts. Once the database is installed, it created a log file and it gives us the path of the log file. In this case, look at an OPT Oracle configuration to logs, libc-xc log, in case you want to check it out. We can actually use the following strings for connecting to the database and the server and the instance of the database, and also tell us that the URL for the localhost 5500 is supposed to be accessible. Now, this is what I was talking about. Sometimes the flash being a little bit of an issue. We'll get to that in a minute. Right now, probably there's going to be some things that we have to address in order to connect, because right now we don't have. This is the first time I open the browser here. Or I really like this logo of the Tux, the Linux Penguin, Unbreakable Linux. Let's see, we can go. The connection was reset. It's HTTPS. And it's a potential risk. Yes, we know that. We can accept the risk and continue. It's asking me for sys. Okay, I'm going to set up some user and password here. That's fine. Let's go ahead and continue with the installation. Right now we set up. The installation of the database. Let's go ahead and assign to the regular account. Let's take a look what happened in the operating system by itself. The hood, it created a user. Oracle, create a user Oracle, and is the one who owns the database, but we don't know the password. So let's go ahead and set up the password for this Oracle user. And this is different than the one, this is for the Linux operating system, right? So once we have a user for this account, let's go ahead and play a little bit with the bash profile on this user. So Oracle. Let's go ahead and basically we export the Oracle Home, which is the OPT Oracle product 18C DB Home, and the Oracle XE because it's Express Edition, and we just extend the path. It's OPT Oracle product. So in that case, we can export that one. So the next time we become the user, let's do Oracle. We can see that actually is there. So see what is in OPT Oracle product. See. Binary. I can do the listener controller status. Apparently says that it's ready. It's actually running and completed successfully. That's the listener. Let me go ahead and make sure we continue in this. One of the things is like listener uses the port 1521. So what I recommend here, check the ports, install nmap, DNF install nmap to see what we have in terms of the ports open in my local host. I know the listener is the one we want to be using to connect to the database. We have to allow it. This is 24 meg. This is quick installation of nmap. It goes there, and once we have it, as you can see, running an nmap to localhost, we can see the 1521, the listener is running in Oracle, and also has the 1500 for the hotline. So in this case, I like to go ahead and add the port 1521 to the firewall configuration, so it's going to be allowed to connect remotely. And also I'm going to add the it's just like this one. TCP. Let's make sure we can add it and connect it remotely. We can reload the firewall commands. The port should be started. Should be able to have access. We can check the listener. We can actually see if it's actually running. So we can do this -Oracle. Listener. We can do. We did a listener. Shows like it's successfully is running. So the SQL plus allow connect. That's CPA. And select. I'm connecting. The database is mounted. We don't need to do the startup. Actually, we can do show PDBs. You can see the XE PDB1. Select start from tab. 8,162 rows selected. Definitely, this is running. We need to execute one more procedure to allow a connection in case you want to use something like SQL Developer, another great product from Oracle, which is let's see. It's a great tool that actually lets you connect to databases. It's a full similar to the SQL Management Studio for Microsoft, and it lets you open connections and execute queries and have a query builder. It's a great tool from a lot of DBA tools, but that procedure will be required if you want to actually let them allow to connect to the listener and respond to those kind of remote administration. So far, that's just about it. We got successfully installed Oracle XE. Let's take a look to the final result in our file system. So we use 17 gigs. We have 10 gigs of allocation, but 27. So just roughly a little bit under 30. I can remove the 2.5 gigs for the installation on the RPMs. That port releases something. Just about 30 gigs is what you will use as a minimum. I will say it. If you want to do some extras, you want to do some backup of your 10 gig data, definitely the 40 gigs is right on the money in terms of what we expect right here. So this concludes this video. In video number 3, we're gonna take this foundation of the installation of the Oracle Express Edition, and what we're going to do is actually on top of that we'll install the Oracle Application Express, so you'll be able to have a portal to connect locally to your database and eventually create applications, workspaces, and everything that comes to it. But so far that's a successful installation. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. Stay tuned, and if you like it, don't forget to give a like and share with your friends. Give it a shot to Oracle. It's awesome. There's a reason why it's the best of the best. Have a good day.